This is a demonstration on how to do a calculator style layout in Interface Builder. Before I do the actual layout, I want to look at a layout I already created so we can see what the structure of it looks like. When you have a view controller, inside the view controller is a view, and the view, which we often refer to as the super view, goes all the way to the edges of the display. The actual calculator that we want to build, I want to go between the top layout guide and the bottom layout guide, and then go all the way to the edge on the left and right sides of the display. So I'm putting a view directly inside the view that is constrained below and above the top and bottom layout guides. That view then serves as a container to hold the rest of the elements, and to build this UI I'm using stack views. This stack view is, as we can see on the little horizontal bars here, is for vertically stacking items. And what I have put inside of this stack view is a other set of stack views, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these stack views, one for each row in this interface design. And then in the very top stack view is a display which is based on a text field. And below that is another display based on a text field. The difference between these two is the background color that is being used. And they have a place for us to enter text, and I made the font a reasonably large size. I believe I made it 40 points. We can check this. If we select the text field, we'll notice that this is a system font of 40 points. Then on the next stack view is 3 items: the C key, the plus minus key, and the converter key. Now these are each buttons, and they're placed horizontally in a stack view, so this is a horizontal stack view, and each one of these stack views is 3 buttons placed side by side. Now to make each of these buttons be the same size, constraints were placed on them so that they would have an equal width to each other. So I basically took each button, the 5, and related it to the 4, and the 6 and related to the 4, and said that they should be equal widths. And this way they share equal space inside of this stack view. Now in the case of the 0 and the decimal point, the 0 occupies the width of 2 buttons. So if this is representing 1 button, then the width of this would be the equivalent of 2 buttons. And we'll notice here that the multiplier on this is 2 to 1. So this is twice as wide as this is. Then we'll also notice there are black lines, or almost black lines, between the buttons. And the way that this was achieved is if we go to the equal widths, you'll notice here it says, multiplier of 1. Here it says multiplier of 1, constant 0. So in the case of these, the button's width is set explicitly based on this equal sizing. So what is given the gap between these items to give us these lines? And I should point out, the lines we're seeing are just gaps between the buttons, and we're seeing through to the view behind it, and the view behind it, I have made it so that its background color is a dark gray. Just to show this, I'm going to change it to green. You can see the lines there are just this view's background color showing through the gaps. So how are those gaps created? I'm going to undo that, put me back to the dark gray. Well, first, if we take a stack view, you'll see that stack views can have spacing. And so here I am changing the spacing between these two items. I'm going to change this back to 1. And then if we go to this, we'll also see that, I'm going to go to a stack view, that this has a spacing of 1 here. I'm changing it to 2. So the stack view is setting the spacing between the items in the stack view. So I'm back to 1 again. And then the same thing on the vertical. If I take the vertical stack, it has a spacing of 1, but it's between the items vertically. So what happens down here, though, is this has 3 items, each with a spacer, but this only has 2 items with a spacer. And I had to do a little fix up here to get this line and this line to line up. So first, the stack view has a spacing of 1, but if I go to this actual button and go to the ruler, we'll see that this has a multiplier of 2 to 1, but then it also has a constant of 1. I'm going to set this to 0 and zoom in a little bit. You'll see that there is just a slight deviation between this line and this line. And if I select this and then say I want to add a constant of 1 there, then it kicked that line over, so it lined them up. So that's the basic idea of the layout. Now let's actually build this layout from scratch. So I'm going to start with an empty view controller, and inside of this view controller I'm going to place a view. I'm going to put here UI view. There we go. Drag the view in, drop it. And then I'm going to not constrain to the margins, because on the trailing and leading sides I want this view to go all the way to the edges, but I do want this view to stay below the top layout guide and above the bottom layout guide. So with this unchecked and those settings made here, so that we're got this check and this check, I'm going to set these all to 0 and then add the 4 constraints. So my view now fits inside of the area I want it to. I want it below the top layout guide, above the bottom layout guide, and go all the way to the edges. So that gives us the dimensions that we need for the UI we're going to place in here. Then I am going to get a stack view. And the first stack view I want is a vertical stack. It's going to define the items being stacked from the top to the bottom, one on top of each other, which each will be a row in my interface where I have my button. So this stack view I want to fit inside of that view. So I'm going to select it, and with constrained to margins unchecked, I'm going to choose all 4 sides and set this stack view to fit inside of the view that I placed. Then in this stack view, I'm going to place horizontal stack views, and I'm going to have 7 of them because I have 5 rows of buttons, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2 rows of display. So I'm going to put 1, 2, Oops, see, now I don't want that stack view inside that stack view. I want them all at the same level. And so that was 2, then we're going to go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have 7 stack views on top of each other, and the stack view is stacking these. So now I want to put buttons inside of my stack view. So I'm going to search for button. And I'm just going to drag it right here. So the button goes inside. So we're going to have 3 buttons across for most of these. I'm going to do it for all of them and then delete the extra button here in a second. So this is 1, 2, 3. So 3 buttons across there, and then I'm going to do this for my other stacks. And if you're worried about the fact that it looks kind of crazy at the moment, we're going to handle how things get laid out in the stacks and how much room they take here in a second. So this is one more stack to put buttons in. And then, so that takes care of the buttons. Then in the top 2 stack views, I want to place these text fields. So I'm going to drag a text field into there. And then I'm going to drag a text field into there. So everything is in place. It just doesn't have the dimensions it needs yet. So the first thing is each of these stack views I'd like to be the same exact height. So the rows of buttons and the rows of display, as I set it up here, are each exactly the same height. So I'm going to take my first stack view and I'm going to control click drag to my second stack view and say equal heights. And then I'm going to go from the first to the third and say equal heights. Then from the first to the fourth one, equal heights. 1, 2, 3. And then I've suddenly forgot, did I do this one? Well, how would I know? I go here. I don't have any properties in terms of layout constraints on this yet. So I'm going to go from here to here and do equal heights. And then from here to here, equal heights. So we got this one, equal heights. This one doesn't have one yet. So I'm going to do this one yet. Equal heights. So now each of these is exactly the same height as the others, which means they evenly divide up the space. So now I want my buttons to do the same thing. So I'm going to take my first stack view and I'm going to control click drag from the first button to the second and say equal widths. From the first to the next one, equal widths. So now these buttons lay out side by side nicely. So I'm going to do this for the rest. So now my buttons are all laid out appropriately. While I'm here, I'm going to delete this button. So this I want to be my 0 button. And this I want to be my decimal point button, but I want this to be twice as wide as that. So I'm going to go to the ruler and I'm actually going to delete the constraints that I placed on this. So this has no constraints. And I'm going to say Control click drag from here to here. I'm going to say equal widths. I'm going to select the 0. Go to the ruler, hit edit. And my multiplier, instead of being 1, so this would be its multiplier of the width of the thing I'm equal to of 1. I'm going to change this to 2 to 1. So this button will be 2 times as wide as the other button. And there we go. 0 decimal point. Let's fill in the rest of what these are. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Nine, and then we had C plus minus converter. C plus or minus, and then converter. So then let's select these 3 buttons and set the font to 40. And that works for these 2. With this one I need to be a little smaller. So I'm going to reduce it until the word converter nicely fits in there. That'll work for me. And I'm also going to set the text color to black. And the background color on each of these buttons is going to be set to a gray. I'm actually going to use the pencils and do the 3rd one over. So then I'm going to choose 7, 8, 9. Again, 40-point font. I want it black. And the individual buttons, background color, 3rd pencil over. So now we want to set up the lines between the buttons. So I'm going to select this stack view and change the spacing to 1. Then I'm going to change this stack view spacing to 1. And this stack view spacing to 1. And continue for all of them. Don't need it on that one. So this goes all the way across. I don't have buttons in it, so I don't need any spacing inside of this. And then on the outer stack view, when I set the spacing, that's going to take care of the horizontal lines. So then I want the background color on my view that surrounds all of this to be a gray, so that kind of punches through. Let's pick something here in those empty lines. And then this bottom display, I am going to set it to be white. So we're going to go to background color, white. And then this top one, I'm going to do a background color that's kind of a light blue. Not quite getting it here, so let me select this again, background. There we go. So I'm going to choose this and choose some nice light color. There we go. Then on this text field, I'm going to set the font to 40. And on this text field, I'm going to set the font to 40. So now I have my basic design laid out. Let me make a few enhancements to this. The converter button I'd like to make orange, so I select it, choose background color, and then choose to make it orange. And I think these fonts feel a little heavy for my taste, so I'm going to select these in rows at a time. If I select those three, I can't select them in another stack view. So I'm going to select them in a stack view at a time. I'm going to go to font, change it to custom font, and I'm going to change this to the Avenir font, which I like, and I'm going to choose a light version of that and put this back at 40 points. So we now have a thinner version of the font, and now I'm going to do the rest just like that. Also notice that the way we did this layout, if we change this to a horizontal orientation, it continues to work. This also works on small devices and on large devices.